Welcome to the Mold Matters podcast. Whether you are looking for help recovering from mold illness or just want to learn more about creating a safe environment for your family, this podcast is the place for you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mold Matters podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Evans, alongside my co-host, Mike Adams.
Jeremy, how are you?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm good, but you did the countdown and you never say two, but you said two this time.
Oh, really?
You usually go 5, 4, 3.
And then I go silent?
And then you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on in your world right now, but.
No, my bad.
Oh, that's
how are you
right.
doing?
No, I'm good. I'm
Yeah?
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just got back from vacation. Took the family to Disneyland with 6 grandkids, all under 7 years old.
Oh, wow. How was that?
Actually, no, all under 8. One's 8. It was a lot of work, Jer.
It wasn't a vacation then?
No, it was fun. It was fun.
That's fun, but
A
it's
lot of work.
tiring.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm good.
All right. So you're rejuvenated.
Yes.
I haven't had any vacation, but I feel rejuvenated because we're having a special guest today.
We have a great guest.
A good friend of ours that we've become friends over the last year or so, Doug Hoffman. For those of you that are in the mold remediation or mold certification, or just in the mold industry in general, I've probably heard of Doug. He's been around the industry a while and kind of made a good name for himself, especially in the last several years as a quality instructor on how to mitigate mold, how to build your home such that it's going to be less inclined to grow mold. He's got a book on that we might talk about here a little bit later. And so I'll give a little bit. Doug, you're already online, but we're going to give you a little introduction here. Doug is the founder and executive director of NORMI. So, we've talked about NORMI a time or two on here, I think, but there are a couple of organizations that do training and certification for mold remediators, and NORMI is one of the top premier organizations out there. It stands for National Organization of Remediators and Mold Inspectors.
Is it mold inspectors or microbial inspectors?
It's microbial inspectors.
Oh, yeah, that was a change, right?
Good catch, Mike.
It was a change, about a year and a half ago.
I forgot about that.
Good catch.
Just when people think I'm not paying attention in the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
I surprise them. Yeah.
That is we won't go into it, but that's an important distinction, right? Right, Doug?
Yes,
It is. It is.
His life passion has been helping people understand how to live healthier indoors and empowering them with the ability to have clean air. I remember you saying one time in your book, I think, that you spent part of your career building homes that made them moldy, and then now you're doing the rest of your career to reverse the effects of some of those early mistakes that you saw in the industry. So
yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
But anyways, Doug, we've been glad to get to know you, and we're glad you've come on the podcast. We found great synergy with Doug, and we kind of have that shared vision of trying to help people live happier, healthier lives by helping the microbial, load in their homes and things like that. So welcome, Doug.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, guys. Mike and Jeremy, great to be with you today and excited to share some information. I think one of the things that I love doing is teaching and training. And I think I've always believed that the person that's the best trainer is the one who can take complex subjects and make them easy to understand. And that's what we try to do in our training programs. And I appreciate your recognizing that. And hopefully today we're going to take a subject that's sometimes a little complex and make it simple so that we all understand how it can affect our health.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, well, I guess if you had to encapsulate the topic of what we're going to talk about under one umbrella, what would you say? Because I've read through.
Well, it's definitely under the indoor air quality discussion, and we're talking about how our houses become contaminated. We don't often think about air infiltration and moisture intrusion problems, but that's one of the most common ways that houses get contaminated indoors. And then because we don't deal with it correctly, we build little toxic soups that we live in. So yeah, I think if that helps kind of focus on what we're going to be talking about, that's the idea.
Yeah, I like it. And let's jump right in there. We've talked about this on the podcast before, but the construction, because that's kind of your background, construction background.
Mhm.
Let's talk about some
Mhm.
of the changes that you've seen in that construction industry that have either contributed to or possibly helped with, microbial growth indoors. But what have you seen?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to go back really old because I'm an old guy. But I can go back into the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I remember when I was growing up, I grew up in Florida and I grew up in the construction industry. My dad was a plumbing contractor, as you know. And so I grew up in the construction industry, started working over the summers. This was back before they actually had child labor laws. So when I was 13, 14, 15 years old, my dad told me, he said, I'm going to teach you the plumbing trade, son, and you may never use it, but you'll never go hungry. And he was
Yeah.
exactly right. So I learned the construction trade. And back then, we were building block houses, essentially, concrete masonry unit houses. And believe it or not, they didn't even have any insulation on the inside walls. They would put up furring strips and then drywall right over the top of it. So I remember in the 60s and 70s when they started insulating houses, well, so they were moving toward tightening them up. And as they began to tighten them up, and that's one of the big changes that's happened, they've gone from that now to houses like the one that I built for myself. As you know, that's a monolithic foam home, incredibly tight house. That difference has made a huge difference, not only in the way we live indoors, but the way we react to our indoor environments, because now we've really tightened them up. And that's why I addressed this subject so comprehensively, I guess, in my book, in Mold-Free Construction, because that's probably one of the biggest change. The other big change, of course, is the products that we're using. And it used to be we were using wood and concrete, and now we're using plastic. Almost everything is
Yeah.
plastic and PVC and petroleum products and off-gassing stuff. And, so yeah, completely different kind of view of homes today than it was certainly when I was growing up.
So with that tightening up word, we tighten up our homes. I've thought about that wording. I think it's kind of funny, but yeah, we do. Uh, like you said, the insulation is part of that tightening up, right? Is what
That's
you're
right.
saying. And then
That's right.
and then
Weather stripping.
weather stripping, the whole wrap that we do around the homes. That came about, the Tyvek wrapping that they do. When did that start?
That started in the late 80s, early 90s. So this was all as a result of the Jimmy Carter days when we
Yep.
started. There was an oil embargo and everybody was concerned. I remember about getting gas and it being rationed,
Yeah.
We
We
could get
waited
gas,
for hours for gas. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Get gas every other day, based on your license plate or whatever it was.
Yeah.
My point is that the Carter days is when they really started tightening things up. Weather stripping was hard to buy. I'll tell you a funny story, Jeremy. I don't know if you know what a jalousie window is, but when I was
Not
growing up, my house had jalousie windows. And what that was essentially strips of glass that are 4 inches wide, and they just kind of sit against each other. It's like almost like they're layered, almost like a cabana shutter.
Oh yeah.
And so
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Oh,
so you open it up or you close it,
Yeah.
and there's this huge gap between each layer of glass.
Yeah.
Well, I remember at our house in the late 70s going through and putting weather stripping between every single one of those panes of glass
Yeah.
wow.
all the way around the house.
We did a
Well,
church house in Kauai that had those windows around the entire church house in
Yeah,
Hawaii.
exactly. Yeah,
So
which
they're
was
still
great
around.
for ventilation, but
Yeah, but yeah. Well, and isn't that how it goes? As you see innovation, even still, I mean, they're innovating in the construction industry, in the plumbing, in all the industries, there's innovation. And you
That's
always
right.
have to wait to see.
Well, the pendulum always swings too far.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
They want to fix a problem and it goes a little bit too far this time fixing that.
Yeah, but you don't see it for the, you don't see it immediately. It might be a few 5-10 years down the line before you start to see the effects of maybe that decision.
I think that's right, and it's I put it in the category of giving the absolute benefit of the doubt that the motivations are right for the changes that we make. It's
Yeah.
the unintended consequences.
Yeah.
It's the things we don't know are going to happen when we make this choice. And I think that's what happened then, because there was this conflicting interests, basically, between energy savings and how is it affecting our indoor air quality. And there wasn't ever a consideration about both.
Yeah, so let's launch into that. Tell us about the unintended consequences. Yeah, because our homes are definitely much more energy efficient. I can attest to that. I live in an older home right now that was built in the 60s, and it feels drafty. Right now in the winter we're in the 30s, getting down into the 30s Fahrenheit, and you can feel the draftiness in certain parts of the home.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not quite as tight as the newer homes, but yeah, what are those unintended consequences? Let's talk about those.
So I'll tell you one thing that's interesting, Jeremy, you may or not know, but there are some cities now, San Antonio is one of them, that requires that you do a blower door test when you build the house. After you finish the house, before they'll give you a certificate of occupancy to prove that you've constructed a very tight home. So, so it's becoming part of legislation across the country to build these really, really tight homes. And so there's good to it, and as long as it's balanced, as long as you understand exactly what you're doing, I think there's some real benefits to having a house that's really tightened up, where you don't have a lot of the air infiltration issues that are going to contaminate our indoor environments.
Yeah. So,
Well, I was going to throw in just this is off the subject just a little bit, but along the same time that we started wrapping the houses tighter, like, late 70s, early 80s, we also, maybe it was in the 70s, that huge switch to sheetrock or drywall as opposed to lap and plaster walls. And then also particle wood or particle board, or, pressed wood came along.
yeah.
And I often think that stuff just led to all kinds of mold problems. You put a drop of water on a piece of lumber, a good piece of lumber, that water just sits on it, right? You put a drop of water on sheet or on pressed wood or particle board, it immediately soaks in. And so we've done some dumb things as well
with the building materials.
And the changes with what we've done. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Doug?
No, absolutely. I think you're exactly right. I think we don't, obviously, you're not going to build a house out of stainless steel, but the bottom line is if you don't consider what kind of products that you're using and where you're using those products, absolutely, you're going to create some problems with them absorbing moisture where otherwise other products absolutely wouldn't. So, yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. And so, with air infiltration, that's kind of where we're going, air and moisture filtration, but with the tightening of the homes and minimizing the air infiltration from outside to the inside, because this is actually something I want to hear your thoughts on this. I want to hear the negative consequences of it, but because you do often hear, and I actually, in many cases out here in Utah where it's dry air, I've kind of, there are many cases when I think, yeah, we do need that fresh air to come in, and it kind of helps. Fresh moving air, can often be a good remedy for some issues. So talk us through a little bit, because it sounds like you're saying air infiltration, generally we want to mitigate from coming inside. Talk about the consequences of that and what we need to do about it.
Sure. Well, the air infiltration issues that we're talking about, I think, are a little bit different in the South than they are in the North. The different in dry climates versus high humidity climates where we are. But I guess what's common with all of that is that, yes, fresh air is a really important addition to our having, I think, good air quality. You've got to dilute the contaminants. I know that's one of the things the EPA says the answer to indoor air quality pollution is dilution. And there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, if you take a glass of oil and you put it in the ocean, it's not going to have much of an effect. But you put a glass of oil in your sink, now you got a problem. So the idea of just the volume of air that you could bring in from the outside makes a big difference in terms of diluting the contaminants. But from an air infiltration issue, I think what we don't think about, Jeremy, are the things that you don't see that's coming in with that air on the airstream itself. And even if you're in the north and you're dealing with dry air, so you don't have relative humidity problem, which we have in the South. When you're bringing air in from the outside, you're bringing in high relative humidity, much higher than you want indoors, 70, 80% in some cases.
Yeah.
But besides that, what about the stuff that you can't see? The pollen, the mold spores, the microbes that are floating on whatever it is that's outside that's floating around in the air, those nanoparticles that you can't see. You see them in a shaft of light in the morning, you know, when you're looking at your bedroom window. Well, all of that stuff is in the air outside as well. And so now what's happening is that, like a little magic carpet ride, it's riding on that stuff, and the microbes are riding with that stuff as it comes in through those cracks and crevices in the windows and the doors. And so that's what I think actually needs to be mitigated. And there are a couple of ways to do it. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have so tight a house that you have no air infiltration. That wouldn't be a smart idea. But the idea and the way we approach it, and I certainly did with my house when I built that, is to have a place where I am bringing fresh air in through a fresh air makeup. And now I'm controlling the air that comes into my house. So I'm still bringing air in from the outside, but in my case, and the way we train on this, and my thoughts are, yeah, I'm going to bring it in, but I'm such an indoor air quality geek that I'm going to make sure that it's cooled or heated and filtered and purified before it ever comes into the environment. And you can't do that if you're just allowing the cracks and crevices to bring that fresh air in.
I see.
Yeah. You know, years ago, I was a maintenance manager for a pretty good sized company, and we had a big fancy computer controlled HVAC system for our plant. I think our plant was maybe 80,000 square feet or something. It was a big plant, but I could control, I think they call them the economizers. I could control the economizers and decide how much fresh air I wanted versus how much do you want to try to save on your electricity bill, you know? And I was always like, look, man, we all just seem way more productive if we get lots of fresh air in here. So I it wasn't my money. So I didn't worry about the electricity bill. I just turned that thing up and got as much fresh air in that building as I could. And it paid off.
Especially a plant where you've got chemicals and all
Right,
kinds of stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it does
Jeremy,
kind of
if I could
sound.
share,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to share a concept with you. I talk about just kind of making it easier to understand. When your house is under negative pressure, if it's a vacuum and you're sucking air in through the cracks and crevices from the outside, one of the ways that you could mitigate that is by opening a window, right? Because all the air is then going to go through the path of least resistance. It's going to go through that window before it ever goes through a crack or crevice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the concept of fresh air makeup. If you can control fresh air coming into the HVAC system, like Mike just talked about, you're bringing air in from the outside, but you're controlling it. And because it's the path of least resistance, then it's going to lower the chance of it coming through those cracks and crevices.
Yeah.
You know, Jeff and I were just down in California helping a lady out, remediating her home. She hadn't been able to live in this home for a couple of years. And we treated it, and she said it's better, but it's still not quite right. And I didn't think it was. I left the day we treated it. I left, and I thought, well, I don't think we got it, Jeff. I told Jeff, I don't think we've got it. Went back the next day, started to really look around because it was rainy the first day and kind of later on in the afternoon. So we really started looking around, and we had treated the crawl space, but I hadn't really looked at the crawl space that close. But what I did the second day is she had two hatches that went into the crawl space from the inside of the house. One was in the master bedroom and one was by the front room. I took both of those covers off and just put clear plastic over the covers and taped them tight. That plastic blew up like a balloon. I mean, so it told me all of her crawl space air is ending up in that house. It was incredible.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Thanks for listening to the Mold Matters podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more in-depth information on mold illness and recovery.